The credit card statement arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were supposed to be ordinary. I had just gotten home from work, kicked off my heels, and was sorting through the mail when I saw an envelope from a bank I had never done business with, Capital One Platinum. My name was printed across the front in bold letters, followed by an address I had not lived at in years. My mother's address. You know that feeling when your body knows something is wrong before your mind can form the words? That is what hit me. My hands went cold, my chest tightened. Something deep in my gut whispered that my entire world was about to crack open. I tore open the envelope right there in my hallway, my work bag still hanging off my shoulder. The statement was 12 pages long. Cash advances at casinos, online shopping sprees, restaurant charges, ATM withdrawals, all of it spanning back 3 years. Page after page of purchases I had never made, at places I had never been, totaling an amount that made my vision blur. $23,000. The current balance due was $23,000 on a credit card that should not exist. I called the fraud department with shaking fingers. The woman on the phone was professional and patient as I explained that this had to be a mistake, that someone had stolen my identity. She asked me to verify my social security number, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name. With each answer I gave, the truth crystallized in my chest like ice. There was only one person who had all of this information, only one person whose address was on the billing statement. The woman asked if anyone in my household could have opened the account without my permission. I heard myself say yes, my mother, and the words tasted like betrayal even though I was the one being betrayed. The police officer who took my report 3 hours later asked me a question that would haunt me for months. Are you sure you want to press charges against your own mother? He said it gently, with genuine concern in his eyes, but the question carried the weight of everything I was about to lose. My family would never forgive me. My brother would call me vindictive. Extended relatives would say I was heartless. But as I sat in that sterile police station, clutching a folder full of evidence of my mother's fraud, I realized something that changed everything. I had already lost them. I had lost them years ago. I just had not been ready to admit it until now. If you have ever felt guilty for choosing yourself, if you have ever been called selfish for saying no, if you have ever wondered why your love is never enough, then stay with me. This story is brutal and messy and real, but I promise you, there is a way out of the darkness. If this resonates with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Your engagement helps this message reach others who are still trapped in the fog, still believing that love is supposed to hurt this much. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, to show you how I became the kind of daughter who could be exploited so completely, and how I finally found the strength to walk away. I grew up in a household where love came with conditions and price tags. My mother, Linda, had always been the center of our universe. Everything revolved around her needs, her feelings, her desires. My father had left when I was 7, and from that moment on, I became more than just her daughter. I became her therapist, her financial advisor, her emotional support system, and her punching bag when things did not go her way. My older brother, Derek, had somehow escaped this dynamic. He was the golden child who could do no wrong, even though he had not held a steady job in years and still lived in our mother's basement at 32. I remember being 12 years old, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, when my mother came home from work in tears. She had gotten into an argument with her boss and was convinced she would be fired. She sat down across from me, mascara running down her face, and told me that if she lost her job, it would be my fault because I stressed her out too much. Even at that young age, I felt the weight of responsibility that should never have been on my shoulders. I spent the rest of that night comforting her, making her tea, telling her everything would be okay, while my own math homework remained unfinished. That pattern continued for years. When I was 16 and got my first part-time job at a local coffee shop, I was so proud. I had dreams of saving up for college, maybe even buying a used car. But within the first month, my mother asked to borrow $50 for groceries. Then it was $100 for a utility bill. Then $200 for car repairs. The word borrow became a cruel joke because the money never came back. When I hesitantly brought it up once, she exploded. She screamed about how ungrateful I was, how she had sacrificed everything to raise me alone. How dare I ask for money back from my own mother? I never asked again. College was supposed to be my escape, but even that became complicated. I had worked hard, maintained a 4 gigapascals, and earned a full scholarship to a state university 2 hours away. My mother cried for days when I told her. She said I was abandoning her, that I was selfish, that I did not care about her well-being. Suddenly, she started having all these health issues. Headaches that sent her to bed for days, chest pains that had her convinced she was dying, dizzy spells that came out of nowhere. Funny thing was, her doctors could never find anything actually wrong. But every single time I mentioned the university, she would clutch her chest or need to lie down. The message was clear. If I left, something terrible would happen to her, and it would be my fault. So I caved. I enrolled at the community college 20 minutes away and stayed home. I told myself it was the practical choice, that I was being smart about money. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was too scared to leave her. During those 2 years, I worked 2 jobs while taking a full course load. I handed over most of my earnings to help with household expenses, even though Derek contributed nothing and my mother never seemed to appreciate my sacrifice. I remember one particularly painful evening when I was studying for finals, exhausted from working a double shift. My mother came into my room and asked me to drive her to the casino because she was feeling lucky. When I explained that I had an exam the next morning and really needed to study, she called me cold and uncaring. She said that I had changed, that college was making me think I was better than her. I drove her to the casino. I failed that exam. After I finally transferred to the university, things got worse instead of better. My mother called me constantly, sometimes 20 or 30 times a day. If I did not answer, she would leave increasingly frantic voicemails. Some were crying, some were angry, some were guilt trips about how she was all alone and I was the only one who cared. I started having panic attacks. My roommate noticed that I would physically tense up every time my phone rang. I began seeing a campus counselor who gently suggested that my relationship with my mother might not be healthy. I was not ready to hear that yet. I graduated with honors and landed a good job as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized tech company. I was proud of myself, truly proud, for the first time in years. I found a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I decorated it exactly how I wanted. I bought plants. I hung up art that made me happy. For a brief moment, I felt like a real adult, building a real life. But my mother had other plans. She started calling me multiple times a day, with various emergencies. Her car broke down and she needed money for repairs. The water heater stopped working. She needed help with medical bills. Her hours at work had been cut. Every week brought a new crisis that required my financial intervention. I would transfer money from my account to hers, watching my dreams of homeownership slip further away with each transaction. When I tried to suggest that Derek could help too, she would shut me down immediately. Derek was going through a hard time, she would say. Derek was fragile. Derek needed support, not pressure. But I was strong. I was capable. I was the one she could count on. The worst part was not the money itself. It was the complete lack of appreciation or acknowledgement. There was never a thank you that felt genuine. Instead, there was always an implied expectation that this was simply what I owed her for existing. When I did receive gratitude, it came with strings attached. She would say things like, "Thank you so much, sweetheart, I knew I could count on you," unlike some people, with a pointed look toward Derek's closed bedroom door. She was pitting us against each other, but I was too deep in the fog to see it clearly. My personal life suffered tremendously. I dated a wonderful man named Jason for about a year. He was kind, patient, and genuinely cared about me. But my mother hated him from the moment they met. She said he was trying to take me away from her. She would call during our dates with emergencies. She would show up at my apartment unannounced when she knew he was there. She once faked a heart attack scare that sent me rushing to the hospital, only to find her sitting up in bed, perfectly fine, annoyed that it had taken me 30 minutes to arrive. Jason was there that night. He saw the whole thing. He tried to talk to me about it in the car on the way home, but I defended her. I made excuses. I said she was just scared and alone. Jason eventually broke up with me. He said he cared about me deeply but could not watch me destroy myself for someone who did not respect me. He said he felt like he was dating both me and my mother, and he had not signed up for that. I was devastated, but a small part of me was also relieved. Maintaining a relationship required emotional energy I simply did not have. All my energy went to managing my mother's emotions and needs. My friends started to distance themselves too. I canceled plans constantly because my mother needed something. I was always stressed, always distracted, always on edge, waiting for the next crisis. One of my closest friends from college, Megan, tried to have an intervention with me over coffee. She told me that she was worried about me, that I seemed like a shell of the person I used to be. She used words like enmeshed and codependent and emotional abuse. I got defensive. I told her she did not understand. that family was complicated, that she had no right to judge my relationship with my mother. We did not speak for months after that conversation. The financial exploitation escalated over the next 3 years. I was 27 years old and had nothing to show for my hard work. No savings, no investments, no property. I was living paycheck to paycheck despite having a good salary, because I was essentially supporting 2 households. My mother had somehow convinced me that her financial problems were my responsibility to solve. She would say things like, "We are a family, we take care of each other," but the care only seemed to flow in one direction. I started tracking the money I had given her. In 3 years, it totaled over $60,000. $60,000 that could have been a down payment on a house, or invested for retirement, or used to travel and experience life. Instead, it had disappeared into a black hole of manufactured crises and poor financial decisions. My mother spent money frivolously, going out to eat multiple times a week, buying lottery tickets, getting her nails done, shopping online, while simultaneously telling me she could not afford groceries. Then came my birthday, my 28th birthday to be exact. I had made plans with a few friends to go out to dinner. Nothing extravagant, just a nice meal at a restaurant I had been wanting to try. My mother called that morning, her voice syrupy sweet, wishing me a happy birthday and asking what my plans were. When I told her about dinner with friends, there was a long pause. Then she said she had assumed we would spend the day together, that she had wanted to take me out, that she was hurt I had made other plans. I felt the familiar guilt creeping in. I offered to meet her for lunch before my dinner. She agreed, but I could hear the disappointment in her voice. Lunch was at her favorite restaurant, the one with the expensive entrees and overpriced wine. She ordered appetizers, the most expensive item on the menu, dessert, and 3 glasses of wine. I had a sandwich and water. When the bill came, she looked at it, looked at me, and slid it across the table with a smile. "Happy birthday," she said, as if I was supposed to be grateful for the opportunity to pay for my own birthday lunch. I paid without saying anything, adding another $80 to my mental tally. That evening at dinner with my friends, I could not stop thinking about the lunch. Something felt different this time. The anger that I usually suppressed was bubbling closer to the surface. My friend Sarah noticed and asked if I was okay. For the first time in years, I told the truth. I told them about the money, about the constant demands, about how exhausted I was. I expected them to tell me I was overreacting, that family was family. Instead, they looked at me with a mixture of sadness and concern. Sarah held my hand across the table and said something that stuck with me. She said, "Your mother is supposed to be launching you into your own life, not anchoring you to hers." Those words echoed in my head for weeks. I started researching online, typing phrases like mother-daughter enmeshment and financial exploitation by family members. I found forums full of people with eerily similar stories. I read articles about narcissistic parents and parentification and emotional incest. It was like someone had written a manual about my life. For the first time, I realized that what I was experiencing had a name, that it was not normal, and that I was not crazy or ungrateful or selfish for feeling suffocated. I decided to try setting a boundary. Just one small boundary to test the waters. The next time my mother called asking for money, I told her I could not help this time because I was trying to save for an emergency fund. Her response was immediate and volcanic. She screamed at me over the phone, calling me selfish and heartless. She said she could not believe she had raised such an ungrateful daughter. She said she had sacrificed everything for me and this was how I repaid her. She hung up on me. Then she sent a barrage of text messages, each one more guilt-inducing than the last. I caved. I sent her the money, but something inside me had cracked. I could not unsee what I had seen. I could not unhear Sarah's words. I could not unfeel the resentment that was growing in my chest like a tumor. I started going to therapy, finding a counselor who specialized in family dynamics. Her name was Dr. Patricia Chen, and she was the first person who validated my experience without judgment. She helped me see the patterns, the manipulation tactics, the ways I had been trained since childhood to prioritize my mother's needs above my own survival. Therapy was painful. I had to confront the reality that my mother, the person who was supposed to love me unconditionally, had been using me. I had to grieve the mother I wished I had while dealing with the mother I actually had. Dr. Chen introduced me to the concept of boundaries, real boundaries, not just the word I had been throwing around. She helped me understand that saying no was not mean or selfish. It was necessary for my well-being. I started practicing small boundaries. I stopped answering every single phone call immediately. I let some calls go to voicemail. I started saying no to requests without providing lengthy explanations or justifications. Each time I set a boundary, my mother would escalate her tactics. She would cry, rage, give me the silent treatment, or recruit Derek to call me and tell me how much I was hurting her. But with Dr. Chen's support, I held firm. Then came the credit card incident. I had been working with a financial advisor to try to clean up the mess of my finances. I was checking my credit score as part of that process when I saw it. A credit card I had never opened, never applied for, showing a balance of $23,000. My heart stopped. I checked the details. The card had been opened 3 years ago. The billing address was my mother's house. The charges were for things like cash advances, online shopping, casino ATM withdrawals, restaurants. I called the credit card company. I explained that this was fraud, that I had never opened this account. They asked if anyone else could have had access to my personal information, and then it hit me like a freight train. My mother had all my information, my social security number, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name for security questions. She had opened a credit card in my name and had been using it for 3 years. I felt physically ill. I pulled over to the side of the road and threw up. This was not just financial exploitation anymore. This was identity theft. This was a crime. This was my own mother committing fraud against me. I sat in my car for hours, crying, trying to process what this meant. I could report her to the police. She could go to jail. But she was my mother. How could I do that to my own mother? I drove to her house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I walked in without knocking, something I never did. She was sitting on the couch watching television, eating ice cream. She looked up, surprised to see me. I held up my phone with the credit card statement on the screen. I asked her if she knew anything about this. I watched her face carefully, looking for any sign of remorse or shame. She barely glanced at the screen before looking back at the television. She said yes, she had opened it, and she needed help paying it off. Just like that. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement of the magnitude of what she had done. She said it so casually, as if she had borrowed a cup of sugar instead of committing a felony. I asked her how she could do this to me. She rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic, that she was my mother and she had raised me, and this was what family did for each other. I felt something inside me snap. It was not a loud break. It was quiet, definitive, final. I looked at this woman who had given birth to me, who had fed me and clothed me and sheltered me, and I realized that she did not love me the way a mother should love a daughter. She loved me the way a parasite loves its host. I was useful to her. I was a resource to be exploited, and she would drain me dry without a second thought if I let her. I told her I was leaving. She laughed and said, "Fine, go ahead, throw a tantrum." I told her I was not coming back. She said I would be back by tomorrow like I always was. I told her I was going to the police. That got her attention. She sat up, the ice cream forgotten. She said I would not dare, that I would not do that to my own mother, that the family would never forgive me. I told her the family had never protected me, so their forgiveness meant nothing. I walked out of that house and I did not look back. I drove straight to the police station and filed a report. The officer who took my statement was kind but direct. He explained that this was indeed identity theft and fraud, that charges could be filed, but that it would likely mean my mother would be arrested and prosecuted. He asked me if I was sure I wanted to proceed. I thought about all the years of emotional manipulation, all the money that had been taken, all the opportunities I had missed, all the relationships that had been destroyed. I said yes, I was sure. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and family drama. My brother called me screaming, saying I was destroying the family. Extended family members came out of the woodwork to tell me I was wrong, that family protected family, that I was being cruel. But something had shifted in me. For the first time in my life, I did not care what they thought. Their opinions had never protected me before, so why should they matter now? The credit card company agreed to remove the fraudulent charges from my credit report once the police report was filed. My credit score, which had been destroyed by my mother's actions, slowly started to recover. I worked with a financial counselor to create a plan to rebuild my savings. I blocked my mother's phone number. I blocked my brother's number. I blocked anyone who tried to make me feel guilty for choosing myself. The criminal case moved forward. My mother was charged with identity theft and fraud. She hired a lawyer who tried to paint me as a vindictive daughter seeking revenge. But the evidence was clear. The credit card statements, the billing address, the pattern of charges. She eventually accepted a plea deal that included probation, restitution, and mandatory financial counseling. She never apologized. Even in court, she maintained that she had done nothing wrong, that she had only done what any mother would do. I did not attend most of the court proceedings. Dr. Chen advised me that my healing did not require me to witness my mother's consequences. I focused instead on building my own life. I changed jobs, getting a significant raise and better benefits. I moved to a new apartment in a different neighborhood, a place my mother did not know about. I started dating again, slowly and carefully, learning to trust my own judgment. Therapy continued to be my anchor. Dr. Chen helped me work through the complex emotions that came with cutting off my mother. There was grief, anger, relief, guilt, and freedom all mixed together. Some days I felt strong and confident in my decision. Other days I felt like a terrible person who had abandoned her mother. Dr. Chen reminded me that I had not abandoned anyone. I had protected myself from someone who was hurting me. There was a difference. I reconnected with Megan, my college friend who had tried to warn me years ago. I called her and apologized for how I had reacted when she tried to help. She cried on the phone and said she had been waiting for my call, that she had never stopped caring about me. We met for coffee and I told her everything. She held my hand across the table, just like Sarah had done at my birthday dinner, and she said she was proud of me. Those words meant more than she could ever know. I started building a chosen family, people who cared about me without expecting me to set myself on fire to keep them warm. I joined a support group for adult children of narcissistic parents. Hearing other people's stories, realizing I was not alone, was incredibly healing. We shared strategies for maintaining boundaries, celebrated each other's victories, and supported each other through the hard days. About 6 months after I cut contact with my mother, I got a letter from her in the mail. I do not know how she got my new address, but narcissists are resourceful. I sat with that letter for 3 days before opening it. When I finally did, I found exactly what I expected. It was not an apology. It was a guilt trip disguised as a reconciliation attempt. She said she forgave me for overreacting, that she was willing to put this all behind us, that she missed me and wanted her daughter back. There was no acknowledgement of what she had done, no accountability, no real change. I threw the letter away. I did not respond. Dr. Chen had warned me that my mother would likely try to hoover me back in, that this was a common tactic. The key was not to engage. Not engaging felt powerful. It felt like I was finally in control of my own life. I was not reacting to her anymore. I was acting according to my own values and needs. The holidays that first year were hard. I had always spent them with family, even when those gatherings were dysfunctional and stressful. But now I had to create new traditions. I spent Thanksgiving volunteering at a community center, serving meals to people who had nowhere else to go. I spent Christmas with Megan and her family. They welcomed me with open arms, treating me like I had always been part of their family. I cried in the bathroom that night, overwhelmed by what it felt like to be in a healthy family dynamic. As time passed, my life began to flourish in ways I had never imagined possible. Without the constant financial drain of supporting my mother, I was able to save money, real money. I opened a high-yield savings account. I started contributing to my retirement fund. I even began researching first-time homebuyer programs. The dream that had seemed impossible was suddenly within reach. My career thrived too. Without the constant emotional exhaustion of managing my mother's crises, I had energy to invest in my professional development. I took on challenging projects. I earned 2 promotions in 18 months. My boss commented that I seemed more confident, more focused. I was. For the first time in my adult life, my energy belonged to me. I started dating Michael about a year after cutting contact with my mother. He was patient, kind, and emotionally intelligent. When I told him about my family situation, he did not run away or tell me I was overreacting. He listened, asked thoughtful questions, and respected my boundaries. He never pressured me to reconcile with my mother. He supported my decision to protect myself. That support meant everything. There were setbacks, of course. Healing is not linear. I had moments of doubt where I wondered if I had made the right choice. I had moments of grief where I missed the mother I wished I had, even though I knew that mother had never actually existed. I had moments of anger where I wanted to scream at everyone who had enabled her behavior or blamed me for setting boundaries. Dr. Chen helped me navigate all of it. One particularly difficult day came when I found out through a mutual acquaintance that my mother had been telling everyone that I had stolen money from her, and that was why we were no longer speaking. She had completely flipped the narrative, making herself the victim of my cruelty. The injustice of it burned. I wanted to defend myself, to tell everyone the truth, to make them see who she really was. But Dr. Chen reminded me that people who knew my character would not believe her lies, and people who chose to believe her were not my people anyway. It was hard advice to follow, but it was right. 2 years after cutting contact, I bought my first home. It was a small 2-bedroom bungalow with a backyard and a front porch. It needed some work, but it was mine. I stood in the empty living room on closing day and cried. This house represented so much more than property. It represented freedom, stability, and proof that I could build a life without my mother's anchor dragging me down. I threw a housewarming party and invited my chosen family. Megan came with a beautiful plant. Sarah brought homemade cookies. Michael helped me hang pictures. My support group friends came and celebrated with me. We sat on my porch as the sun set, drinking wine and laughing, and someone said I looked happy. I realized they were right. I was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way I had never been before. There were still hard moments. Mother's Day was particularly difficult. Social media was full of posts celebrating mothers, and I felt the weight of not having a mother to celebrate. But I also remembered all the Mother's Days I had spent catering to my mother's demands, buying expensive gifts I could not afford, planning elaborate brunches while she complained about everything. This Mother's Day, I treated myself to a spa day. I celebrated my own strength for mothering myself through the healing process. I also dealt with people who did not understand my decision. Strangers, acquaintances, even some well-meaning friends would hear that I did not speak to my mother, and would say things like, "But she is your mother," or "Family is family," or "You will regret this when she is gone." Those comments used to shake me, making me question myself. But over time, I developed a response. I would say firmly but politely that my relationship with my mother is private and my boundaries are not up for discussion. Some people respected that. Some people did not. I learned to be okay with both outcomes. The longer I maintained no contact, the more clearly I could see the patterns that had defined my childhood and young adulthood. I could see how my mother had trained me to be her emotional support animal from a young age. I could see how she had isolated me from relationships that might have helped me escape. I could see how she had used my natural empathy and compassion as weapons against me. Understanding those patterns was painful but necessary. It helped me make sure I would never allow that dynamic to be replicated in my future relationships. I also had to grieve for my brother. Derek had never been close to me, but I had always hoped that someday we might have a real sibling relationship. After I cut contact with my mother, he made it clear where his loyalty lay. He sent me occasional angry messages, always siding with her, always blaming me for the family falling apart. Eventually, I blocked him too. I grieved the brother I had wanted, even though he had never really existed either. About 3 years after I left, I heard through someone that my mother had started telling people she had disowned me, that she was the one who had cut me off. It was such a blatant rewriting of history that I almost laughed. Almost. The reality was that this narrative served her needs. She could not handle being the one who was rejected, so she flipped the script. In her version, she was still in control. I was still the ungrateful daughter. Nothing was ever her fault. I understood by then that she would never change, never take accountability, never see me as a person rather than an extension of herself. I eventually stopped checking on her through mutual connections. Her life, her choices, her narrative were no longer my concern. That disconnection, that true emotional freedom, took time to achieve. But when I got there, it felt like finally putting down a backpack full of rocks that I had been carrying my entire life. My shoulders straightened, my breathing deepened. I could move through the world without the constant weight of her expectations and manipulations. Michael and I got engaged in my 4th year of no contact. He proposed in our backyard, the one I had worked so hard to buy. As I looked at the ring on my finger, I felt a moment of sadness that my mother would not be at my wedding. But that sadness was quickly replaced by relief. I would not have to manage her emotions on my wedding day. I would not have to worry about her making a scene or competing for attention. My wedding would be about Michael and me, surrounded by people who genuinely loved and supported us. That sounded perfect, the therapy continued, even years later. Some people asked me why I still went to therapy when I was doing so well. The answer was simple. Therapy was not just about crisis management. It was about continued growth, about making sure I did not slip back into old patterns, about processing new challenges as they arose. Dr. Chen had become someone I trusted deeply, and our sessions were an investment in my continued well-being. I started volunteering with a nonprofit that helped young women develop financial literacy and independence. Teaching others about budgeting, credit, and protecting themselves from financial exploitation felt like turning my pain into purpose. I could not change what had happened to me, but I could potentially prevent it from happening to someone else. The young women I worked with reminded me of my younger self, and I wished I had someone like me in my corner back then. One of the most healing moments came when I was able to help a young woman in my volunteer group who was dealing with a mother eerily similar to mine. She came to me after a session, crying, asking if I thought she was a terrible person for wanting to move across the country to get away from her mother. I told her my story. I told her about the credit card, the court case, the years of healing. I told her that protecting yourself from abuse is never wrong, even when the abuser is your parent. She hugged me tight and thanked me for giving her permission to choose herself. I went home and cried that night, but they were good tears. Healing tears. I also found healing in unexpected places. I took up painting, something I had always wanted to do but never had time for when I was managing my mother's life. I was terrible at it at first, but that did not matter. The act of creating something just for me, with no one to please and no one to judge, was incredibly freeing. I painted abstract pieces full of color and emotion. Each canvas was a piece of my healing journey. Michael and I got married in a small ceremony surrounded by our chosen family. It was beautiful and intimate and everything I had ever wanted. There was a moment during the reception when I looked around at all the people who had supported me through my journey, and I felt overwhelming gratitude. These people had seen me at my lowest and had never given up on me. They had celebrated my victories and held me through my defeats. This was what family was supposed to be. The question of children came up after we got married. I was terrified. I was afraid I would repeat my mother's patterns. Afraid I would hurt my children the way she had hurt me. Dr. Chen and I spent many sessions working through these fears. She helped me see that awareness was my greatest protection. I knew what not to do because I had lived through it. I knew what healthy parenting looked like because I had studied it intentionally. I would not be a perfect parent, but I would be a safe parent. That was what mattered. 5 years after cutting contact with my mother, I gave birth to a daughter. Holding her in my arms for the first time, I made a promise. I promised that I would never make her responsible for my emotions. I promised that I would never exploit her financially or emotionally. I promised that I would let her be her own person with her own dreams and her own life. I promised that my love for her would be unconditional, not transactional. I promised that she would always be safe with me. Becoming a mother myself brought up complicated feelings about my own mother. I could not fathom treating my daughter the way my mother had treated me. The love I felt for my child was protective, nurturing, and selfless. It made my mother's behavior even more incomprehensible. How could someone look at their child and see a resource to be used rather than a person to be loved? I would never understand it, and I finally made peace with the fact that I did not need to understand it. There were moments when I wondered what my mother would think of her granddaughter. Would meeting her grandchild change her? Would it soften her? Would she finally see what she had lost? But I knew the answer. Narcissists rarely change because they do not believe they need to change. My mother would find a way to make my daughter about her, to use her as another tool for manipulation, to drive a wedge between us. I would not allow that. My daughter would grow up knowing she was loved for who she was, not for what she could provide. I explained to my daughter, when she was old enough to understand, that she had a grandmother she would never meet. I told her in age-appropriate terms that sometimes people, even family members, are not safe to be around. I told her that choosing to protect yourself and your family from harmful people is not mean or wrong. It is necessary and brave. She hugged me and said she was sorry I had to go through that. Her compassion and understanding, even at such a young age, confirmed that I was breaking the cycle. The financial recovery took years but was ultimately successful. I paid off all my debts. I built an emergency fund. I invested in retirement accounts. I even started a college fund for my daughter. Every time I checked my accounts and saw the numbers growing, I felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond money. These numbers represented my freedom, my hard work, my refusal to be a victim anymore. I also worked on forgiving myself. Dr. Chen helped me understand that I had been doing the best I could with the tools and understanding I had at the time. I was not stupid or weak for staying as long as I did. I was trauma-bonded and manipulated by someone who was supposed to love me. Forgiving myself for the years I lost, for the money I gave away, for the relationships I damaged, was one of the hardest parts of healing. But it was also one of the most important. Looking back now, almost a decade after that text message in my childhood bedroom, I can see how far I have come. The woman I was then, trembling and reading about $23,000 of fraud, would barely recognize the woman I am now. I am strong, confident, and clear about my worth. I have healthy relationships built on mutual respect and genuine care. I have a career I am proud of, a home I love, a husband who partners with me as an equal, and a daughter who will never doubt that she is loved unconditionally. There are still hard days. Healing is not a destination, it is an ongoing process. Some days I still feel the phantom weight of my mother's demands. Some days I still catch myself falling into old patterns of people-pleasing or over-explaining. But I am aware now. I catch myself. I course-correct. I remind myself that I do not owe anyone my emotional or financial well-being in exchange for love. I also recognize now that cutting contact with my mother was not just about protecting myself. It was also about honoring myself. It was about saying that I matter, that my needs matter, that my life matters. It was about refusing to accept crumbs and calling them love. It was about demanding better and being willing to walk away when better was not offered. These are lessons I will carry with me forever, and lessons I will teach my daughter. The support group I joined all those years ago is still a part of my life. Some members have come and gone, but a core group of us have stayed connected. We celebrate each other's milestones, support each other through setbacks, and remind each other that we are not alone. These people understand in a way that others cannot. They have lived it. They get it. They are my family in the truest sense of the word. I have also learned to be okay with being misunderstood. Some people will never understand why I cut off my mother. They will judge me without knowing the full story. They will think I am cold or unforgiving or holding a grudge. I used to let those judgments hurt me. Now I understand that their opinions are based on their experiences, not mine. They do not have to understand my decisions. They are not living my life. I am. The last time someone suggested I should reconcile with my mother because life is short, I simply said my life is precious and I choose to spend it with people who value me. That ended the conversation. I have learned that I do not owe anyone an explanation for my boundaries. Not friends, not acquaintances, not strangers with opinions. My boundaries are mine to set and maintain, and the right people will respect them without needing detailed justification. One unexpected gift of this journey has been the development of my intuition. For so many years, my gut instincts were suppressed and overridden by my mother's needs and manipulations. I learned not to trust myself. But in the years since cutting contact, I have slowly rebuilt that trust. When something feels off, I pay attention. When someone crosses a boundary, I address it immediately. When I need space or time or help, I ask for it. This reconnection with my own inner wisdom has been transformative. I think about the woman I was at 28, standing in that bedroom, reading that text message. If I could go back and talk to her, I would tell her that she is stronger than she knows. I would tell her that the hardest decision she will ever make will also be the best decision. I would tell her that she deserves love that does not cost her everything. I would tell her that healing is possible, that happiness is possible, that a life beyond survival is possible. I would tell her to hold on, because it gets so much better. So here I am today, living a life I once thought was impossible. I wake up in my own home, the one I bought with money I earned and kept for myself. I look at my bank account without that sick feeling of dread. I make plans without checking my phone every 5 minutes, waiting for the next crisis. I laugh without guilt. I rest without permission. I exist without apology. Am I perfect? God, no. There are still days when my phone rings and my chest tightens before I even look at who is calling. There are still moments when I catch myself over-explaining a simple boundary, that old programming kicking in. There are still nights when I lie awake wondering if I made the right choice, if I could have tried harder, if I am really as terrible as my mother said I was. But those moments are getting fewer and further between. And when they come, I have the tools now to work through them instead of drowning in them. What I have now is something I could never have imagined in those dark years. I have peace. Real, deep, bone-level peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing that no one is going to ambush me with a financial crisis or an emotional breakdown. The kind of peace that lets me sleep through the night without nightmares. The kind of peace that allows me to just be. I look at my daughter sometimes and my heart breaks for the little girl I used to be. She deserved this kind of childhood. She deserved to be held without conditions. She deserved to play without worrying about her mother's moods. She deserved to dream without being told her dreams were selfish. I cannot go back and give that to her. But I can make damn sure my daughter never knows what it feels like to be used by the person who is supposed to protect her. Every day, in 100 small ways, I am teaching her what I had to learn the hard way. When she sets a boundary with me, I respect it. When she says no, I honor it. When she makes a choice I do not agree with, I support her right to make it. I tell her that my love for her is not something she has to earn or maintain. It just is. It always will be. No strings, no conditions, no price tag. That is the cycle I am breaking, not just for her, but for every generation that comes after. My daughter will not grow up learning that love means sacrifice until there is nothing left of yourself. She will not grow up believing that her worth is measured by her usefulness. She will not grow up carrying the weight of someone else's dysfunction on her small shoulders. She will grow up knowing she is enough, exactly as she is. And if she is blessed enough to have children of her own someday, she will pass that gift on to them. This is my legacy. Not money, not accomplishments, not some grand gesture that gets written about. My legacy is breaking the chain of generational trauma. My legacy is choosing healing over history. My legacy is proving that you can come from dysfunction and still create something beautiful. That is the gift I am giving to future generations, and it is the most important thing I will ever do. If you are reading this and seeing yourself in my story, please know that you are not alone. You are not crazy. You are not ungrateful. You are not selfish for wanting to be treated with basic respect and dignity. You deserve relationships that fill you up rather than drain you dry. You deserve to live a life that is yours, not one that exists solely to serve someone else's needs. And you have the right to walk away from people who hurt you, even if those people are family. It will be hard. It will be painful. There will be days when you question everything. But on the other side of that pain is a freedom you cannot imagine from where you are standing now. It is a freedom I wish for everyone who has ever felt trapped in a toxic relationship, wondering if they will ever escape. You can escape. You can heal. You can build a beautiful life. I am living proof. So what about you? Have you ever had to make an impossible choice between your own well-being and someone else's expectations? Have you ever been made to feel guilty for setting boundaries with family? How did you navigate it? What helped you through? Please share your story in the comments. Your experience matters and might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this story resonated with you or might help someone you know, please like this video, subscribe for more stories of resilience and healing, and share it with others who might need this message. Together, we break the silence around family dysfunction and create space for real, authentic healing. Thank you for listening to my story.